Hello, brilliant and embodied souls. My name is Kim, and I am the Somatic Sorceress. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I wanted to share tarot decks that meet me in my emotions. Meeting myself and having my emotions mirrored back to me is a vital part of my practice and something that I feel into with myself and with others on a daily basis. As someone who, provides both psychotherapy, but also, other types of healing sessions, I really understand how we need to be met in the difficult emotions as much as the pleasant and comfortable emotions that are all a part of the human experience. Being mirrored, attuned to in emotions is a critical part of human development. It's so essential, and often why I feel anger, sadness, as two examples, is because I haven't had the people around me adequately validate those emotions. And sometimes other people can't do that for us, right? Because they're going through something, they're at capacity, we've had a conflict with them, they're just not available. And then what do we do, right? And so a big part of, again, part of my healing journey, the healing journey that I support other people through, has to do with learning how to validate, meet ourselves in challenging emotions. We can use tarot to do that, which is so phenomenal. When we're maybe alone, we can turn to our decks. Our decks can serve as that mirror and can serve as a container to support and validate us, both in the uncomfortable emotions and as well as the comfortable and delicious emotions. Today, I want to share those decks with you. They'll be broken up into two categories. We'll start with the uncomfortable emotions and then move to the more comfortable and pleasant emotions. And I'm going to flip us around so that we can look a little bit closer at these decks. So bear with me and see you in a second. Okay, we are back. Before I get into the two categories of emotions, I want to preface some of this by saying all emotions serve a purpose within the human experience, and even uncomfortable emotions are necessary to us living our lives. So part of my intention in sharing these decks and talking about emotions within the context of these decks is helping folks understand the value of uncomfortable emotions and the purpose that they serve. Okay, let's talk about our first deck and our first emotion. I have the Mars Power Tarot, which is by Charlie Quintero. You can check out the details on the back of the little book. And this deck helps me with anger. Mars, of course, in astrology being the planet of action, the planet of war, among other things. It makes sense that this deck would mirror me when I'm feeling especially angry. The color palette, as you can see, is super bright and vibrant. There's tons of reds. The energetic nature of this deck, the Wheel of Fortune card here is a perfect example, right? When we're feeling angry, like my head can actually feel like that. My head feels like it's going to explode. And that's kind of what I mean about having a deck that can meet us and mirror us in a particular emotion. This deck shows me exactly how I feel. The Five of Wands, again, a phenomenal example of this. When I'm in a conflict with someone, which of course is what the Five of Wands can be about, competition, conflict, etc. I feel like I am pushing against them, and there's so much energy between us. It creates a wall between us. This card shows that perfectly. There's just so much action in this deck. Its personality is very fierce, takes no crap, is gunning for some sort of explosion or output. So when I'm feeling angry, I feel so seen by this deck. Truth be told, I generally don't work with this deck unless I am feeling angry. Some of the cards don't necessarily make sense to me when I'm not feeling angry. I utterly adore this deck. It's just such a warrior. This deck is a warrior. It has a cause, and when I'm feeling especially warrior-like and like I've got some kind of cause, I pull out this deck. Getting into anger and the function of anger lets us know when there's unfairness, when our boundaries have potentially been crossed or infringed upon. Anger lets us know our own self-worth. These are such important functions of anger. And anger often isn't recognized for these functions because it does have a destructive relational quality. When we bring anger into our relationships, it generally doesn't go well, right? So I totally get why anger gets the rap that it does. And yet we need anger for all those things that I just mentioned. This deck helps me recognize my needs, creates a container for my anger so that I can process it and not bring it into a given situation. For that reason, this deck is invaluable to me, even though I don't work with it a whole lot. Okay, let's move on to the next uncomfortable emotion, and that is embarrassment or shame. Here I have the Abyssal Tarot by Shelley Corbett, and the guidebook is written by Stefan Alblum. You can see that here. This deck isn't, just about embarrassment and shame. It's about sensuality, but there's the rub, right? So many of us have shame and embarrassment around our sexuality, our sensuality. This deck is utterly beautiful. It has nudity. There's cards within this deck that do make me feel a touch uncomfortable, a touch sort of angsty. When I'm feeling embarrassed or ashamed, not just with regards to my sexuality or my sensuality, but in general, this card meets me because of the underwater photography. When I'm experiencing embarrassment and shame, I can feel very underwater. I can feel very isolated. I can feel just in the depths. There's a lot of shadow and darkness within this deck, like diving into the depths, if you will. The personality of this deck is very scorpionic. It's not afraid of the things that cause us embarrassment. It's not shying away from that alone feeling that comes with shame and embarrassment. It too is a fierce deck. I could see how this deck could actually be somewhat triggering to folks. And again, when I'm feeling in a particular kind of way, this deck really meets me. The function of shame and embarrassment, is holding us to account with other people. I always think of the show Shameless, right? And so many of the characters in that series, do have a sense of shame. Other characters don't. And when we don't have a sense of shame, we can do really terrible and messed up things to other people. So shame is such a relational emotion, and it helps us, it can keep us in check within our relationships, which is the generative aspect of shame. Of course, the destructive aspect of shame is that we can isolate and become islands onto ourselves within the shame, which is so painful, so very painful. Okay, let's move on to sadness. And here I have the Intuitive Tarot by Scylla Conway. There is a melancholy quality to this deck. The colors are very rich and vibrant, and yet the contrast between, the orange and kind of this muted, almost sickly green ends up making me, meeting me in a melancholic, sad mood. I love this Five of Cups. It's one of my favorites. The expressions on some of the people really say sadness to me. The postures of the figures without faces feel weighed down, which is often how I feel when I'm experiencing sadness. The guidebook can be confronting and asks me to consider my role in things. Even traditionally or stereotypically happy cards feel a touch mournful to me in this deck. Looking at the cards right now, I am just coming back to moments where I felt especially sad, sorrowful, used this deck and felt better because I wasn't alone with my sadness. And that's what sadness is asking us to do. It's asking us to notice the things that we love and maybe have lost. Sadness can be oh so beautiful, and this deck is very beautiful to me. Sadness wants us to see the beauty, that bittersweet beauty. Sadness lets us know what we long for, what we need. The personality of this deck is that friend who you can turn to and be real with. This is a very, very good friend type of deck. It can be a touch dramatic. You know, it's maybe like a little bit of like your emo theater kid friend. but there's a maturity. I shouldn't call this deck a kid. It's actually very mature. It feels very grown up to me. Okay. My last deck in the uncomfortable category is the deck that represents fear as well as disgust, and that is the Tarot of Vampires. This deck is all about confronting fear. I believe Ian Daniels even says as much in the guidebook. Many people on the Tarot Tubes have talked about the amazingness of the guidebook. I will join in that cacophony of praise. The guidebook is phenomenal. The artwork is so emo, right? And because its theme is vampires, there's an element of surprise, there's an element, but not good surprise, right? Fear. I mean, just imagine truly meeting some of the characters in this deck on a dark street, and I would be very afraid. This deck, therefore, meets me when I feel afraid and helps me move into a place of empowerment in my fear. This deck also, because of it's campy, of course, so like that's another aspect of dealing with fear is getting to the bottom of it in a way and learning how to overcome that fear. The campiness of the deck really does help in that respect. The personality of this deck is, it wants to kind of freak me out. It likes to seduce me, then surprise me. And not always in great ways. The role of fear in our lives, right, of course, is protection. It helps us know that we are alive. And of course, that's the thing about the vampire myth is, what does it mean when we don't have to worry about our mortality? Vampires are so emo, they are so moody because they're not alive anymore and they go on forever. And if you don't have to worry about your mortality, like what do you have to worry about? There's so many existential themes within this deck. So this deck is a existential philosopher. It is very Nietzschean. It also, it does have a sense of humor, I will say that, which I appreciate when I am feeling afraid. I I want to be mirrored in my fear, but then I also want to be brought out of it. And the Tarot of Vampires really does help in that project. Okay. All right. I'm going to put that away later. Let's get into some of the comfortable and pleasant emotions, shall we? Let's start with joy. And I have the Lightseers Tarot by Chris Ann. Mass market deck. I guess I haven't really been saying if things are mass market or indie. Oops, sorry. There's the internet. This deck is so cheerful. You know, even cards that are more difficult cards, like the Three of Swords, have a, you know, this is just a touch cheesy, you know, like it gets the point across, but it doesn't have the impact of the Three of Swords in the other decks that I previously showed. I love reading for other people at parties and, you know, just gatherings with this deck because it has a friendly, blissful quality. Because of that friendly, blissful quality, the messages are digestible. You can receive the difficult things that this deck can say. The personality of this deck is just the Sun card says it all. This deck is this card. It's bright, it's sunny. It's kind of a cheerleader. That's the spirit of this deck. This deck is my personal cheerleader. I love and adore it. Joy, of course, taps into ecstasy and is a huge motivator within life. Joy propels us into possibility, into creativity. I dig me some joy. And, you know, sometimes, right, we can be in a really joyful state and other folks around us aren't. So we can feel alone in our joy and happiness. When that's taking place in my life, I will pull out this deck and again be met in that emotion by the tarot, specifically the Lightseers Tarot. Okay, let's get into love. And I have the Circle of Doors Tarot. And I guess like more specifically like connection, love. These are such, like it's so vital to the human experience to be able to feel connected, supported, loved. This deck meets me in that connection. It has a deep feminine power, a deep accepting nature. This deck is many, many things beyond just love, acceptance, connection. I love and connect with this deck. So, you know, I think that that's part of the reason I chose it for this particular emotion. But again, there's a lot of qualities within this deck. It's a well-rounded deck. It can meet me in all of the uncomfortable emotions that I already mentioned. And yet just my bond with this deck results in me feeling supported, met, accepted. The personality of this deck is so robust and rich. It is so multifaceted. I've spoken, I will continue to speak about this deck because it's my absolute favorite, truly. If I only had one deck, it would be this deck. Okay, let's talk about sort of the flip side of fear, or another face of fear, and that is surprise and excitement. Anxiety, fear, their cousins are surprise, excitement, possibility. Here I have Crow's Magic. I have the facsimile copy as a heads up. This is, of course, an out of print deck. This deck is very strange, ergo it often surprises me by what it has to say. And that's the purpose of surprise in our lives, right? Surprise, of course, keeps us on our toes. It helps us navigate change. Because this deck is so cyber and comes from a realm onto itself, it's this weird digital animal ritual domain. Within that domain, there's so many unique things to discover. The keywords on this deck can sometimes be confounding, but I like being confounded by this deck. Again, because the keywords aren't necessarily ones that you find on, say, a Thoth tarot, or maybe you would even come up with for yourself with a RWS, because the keywords are unique. It provides a very different perspective. If I'm feeling a touch stagnant, I will actually turn to this deck, and it can sometimes mix things up for me, which is really helpful and enjoyable. Okay, let's turn to our last deck on this list. And that deck is the Moonchild Tarot by Danielle Noel. And this deck is my awe deck. I have many decks that inspire a sense of awe. But this deck, oops, let me turn that around. This deck is gentle awe. It's a soft, welcoming awe. This Page of Pentacles is just a perfect example of that, right? This reaching up, reaching into the light, reaching towards the divine. The gateways and sort of empty space. I mean, the space isn't empty, but there's these portals within the deck, which really meet me when I'm wanting to step into something new, step into the beyond. This deck really serves that function. The Six of Pentacles is such a great example, right? I can see myself within this temple. I can feel the sacredness of this space and use the energy of the card to catapult me into the divine. Awe is the sacredness of life, which is such a vital role, such a vital emotion, a vital experience to have. Not on the regular, but, available to us. I know so many people who have been cut off from their sense of awe, and I see the damage that does to their psyches. Having a deck that welcomes us into that awe and beckons us into that awe is so valuable, at least for me. The personality of this deck is very gentle, loving. She is your, a touch new age. There is a new age bent to this deck and many of Danielle Noel's other decks. So, she's your Piscean friend who talks about chakras and like Akashic records and like all that kind of stuff, which is not always my bag. In fact, it really isn't. However, I still appreciate, I appreciate hanging out with people and hanging out with a deck that has a slightly different POV on what the human soul is up to. That's cool. That's cool. All right, I think that does it for this deck list. The last thing that I really want to say before we conclude things is, if you're struggling with emotions, please know that you are not alone. I think that when we're in the depths of difficult emotions, as well as not feeling met in the beautiful ones, we can feel terribly, terribly isolated, and that isolation only compounds the issue. I just want to leave you with an understanding that you're not alone, and you can use your decks to meet yourself, take care of yourself in those moments. Of course, decks are no substitute for professional support or the support of trusted family members, trusted friends. And I get it. Not everybody has that network of support. So if you are someone who does not have that type of network, know that my heart is with you. Thank you so much for joining me in this exploration of emotions. Like, subscribe, the things. Leave me a comment, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.